Five Nights at Freddy's security breach has been quite controversial. From the many bugs to the rushed release date, the team has been in damage control mode ever since the official release of the game back in December. However, while there was a long wait, a few months later we have ourselves the first patch for the game. And today we're going to talk about the patch's contents and maybe more importantly, its effect on this game as a whole. So Steelwool, back when they first announced this patch, had described what's changing with the game, and to clarify, there are two main fixes coming to the patch. The first category being in bug fixes, and the other being quality of life improvements. Also, by the way, before discussing, make sure to join my Discord and say hi to me, link in the description, by the way. I'm sure if you've been playing this game, you've ran into many issues with the bugs and the quality of life things, but they are supposedly fixing them in this update. So in regards to bug fixes, the first big thing that we have is the fixing of the visuals of the game, more specifically the PlayStation 4 version. And the reason for this is simply because the PlayStation 4 version just looks terrible, since it's the lowest quality console that can still run the game. But this patch should make those limitations at least a little bit less noticeable. The next fix is supposed to fix something I personally haven't noticed, but is apparent enough to address. And it's the patching of the game's jump scares. Because there have been issues where apparently the players would experience a jump scare in the game's end credits, or even have the characters just straight up disappear midway through the scare. So hopefully anybody who had to deal with the stress of beating the game just to get jump scared literally in the credits should be all good now. There is a small loading fix to, I assume, prevent things from loading in incorrectly and looking how they're not supposed to. And the final bug fix that we have is the fixing of the map in a few ways. The first way being by improving the layout for checkpoints, as oftentimes there are ways to exploit checkpoints, or for more casual players it's possible to even end up missing them entirely, which just sounds dreadful. So thank goodness they fixed that. Moving towards the quality of life improvements, there are a few of these as well. First, there's going to be a small change improving how skipping cutscenes works, along with making the color coding of the wires in the daycare and parts and service all consistent throughout. Another small thing is going to be some basic balancing to boss fights, and then we have two much larger changes that have been talked about quite a bit. The first one was an issue that I personally found to be a huge problem, which was the game's file size. And apparently in this patch, there's been quite a bit of work done to decrease the size of the file, which should hopefully make the game much more optimized. As while I have no clue where I had seen it, somewhere I found that the potential reason the game was so big had something to do with the compressing of the files, and apparently the game could have easily been decreased down to a smaller size with just some effort. So I'm not sure what they did to decrease the file size, but it seems like they finally are figuring it out. The last patch that I've seen talked about the absolute most of all was the addition of a save station in the atrium for overtime to make the game a lot easier. And this was also something I've expressed concerns for in the past. The fact that this game was difficult in a way that didn't make much sense. Because while I believe making hard games can be rewarding and fun, doing it by just straight up making less checkpoints feels weird and less rewarding than it probably should be. So that's all the updates that are said to come to the game, and that's all cool and great. This patch notes statement came out all the way at the very end of January and has been set for an early to mid-February release. Although, as of writing this, we're in the later half of February and we still have nothing, so it could be a delay. But judging by the fact that the wait is yet to be addressed, I imagine things are still being worked on and they may just be doing some final work on the patch. Because as we, and I'm sure all of them at this point know, rushing things does not tend to work in anyone's favor. But what I'm wanting to sort of discuss with all this being said is how these patches are going to affect the game now and in the future. Because if you've seen pretty much any of my previous FNAF videos, I, among many others, have had a lot of issues with this game. And not for its concept or idea or anything like that, but rather for how the game was executed. Because while clearly a ton of work and time was put into the game to make it feel like the largest and most ambitious title yet, that came at a huge sacrifice in game quality, because realistically, it doesn't play all that well. Now, by the time this video comes out, the patches are probably already going to be out with more fixes than I'm mentioning now, because they said that they're working on even more things, and people will be testing to see how well they work. But when analyzing these notes, I'm going to take it from the perspective that everything they're saying is going to go through well. And while I'm 90% sure there won't be any issues with these patches, you never know, especially when considering the current state of the game pre-patch. But anyway, this is a huge improvement for the team, and it may have a huge effect on the way everything is handled. Because as mentioned, despite the game being known for being pretty decent in concept, there's been an entire community of people making memes just about the glitches inside of the game. And while on one hand, these glitches are honestly pretty funny and add a more lighthearted tone to this game, as a whole, these things are going to negatively affect the reputation of the game, and that's what I wanted to discuss more in depth here. The fact that this game may be in some troubled territory as it is. Because similar to what happened to games like Fall Guys, or even to an extent Among Us, the first reputation of the title, whether good or bad, is really going to determine the fate of it moving forward, even retrospectively, as we are starting to see here already. The title has left off a mark of laziness and overambition from the start, leading to many people disregarding and its overall quality because of these factors. We see this issue with games all the time, as I've talked about in countless other videos, where they release a buggy mess and end up gaining a really negative reception. However, what happens 90% of the time with these games is that they over time get better. Especially if the game comes out buggy, the companies are going to keep refreshing the game as quick as they can to improve it overall, but yet that still doesn't really mean as much as you'd think. Most likely, if I told you to describe the game Cyberpunk 2077's quality in one word, you'd most likely say buggy, glitchy, rushed, etc. But if you hopped on the game right now, those things for the most part wouldn't at all be prevalent, at least in comparison to the past. So why is it still regarded in this way? Well, for the same reason that I believe FNAF is going through this massive amount of hate. Because if a game is released with all these problems, going in and patching them isn't just going to make them disappear forever. The game will live in infamy for its horrid bugs and game size, among other things. As a whole, I just don't feel like this game is going to get that much positive reception in the grand scheme of things despite these fixes. But it's not all negative, because I mean, a patch is a patch. So no matter its reputation, the game is still going to be a lot more enjoyable to play, despite the poor initial reception anyway. And I hope the best for Steelwool, especially since many people are theorizing that the fans were the ones actually responsible for the game's lack of polishing, which I talked about in this video here. Go check it out. As mentioned, join my Discord, I'll be talking there, and subscribe. Peace.